What's up, podcast community? My name's Cam King. This is episode number 77 of Three Questions Podcast. And today I have my good friend, a client, a combat veteran, an author, an awesome dude, Andrew Coville from Massachusetts. Andrew, what's up, man? How you doing?
What's going on, Cam? Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
No worries. I know you've listened to a couple of these episodes or not. It's totally fine. These are all pretty quick, hard-hitting episodes. My goal has been to basically take three questions from my clients or three questions that I think of for myself, stuff I'm trying to learn, stuff I Google, stuff I wish I had known earlier. And I don't think that people should have to listen to like hour-long podcast or 2 hour-long podcast. So I've condensed this podcast idea into just 15, 20 minutes of like hard-hitting info that people can take away from, listen to on their way to work or walking their dog, whatever. And I want to get more interesting people on there. It's not my goal to do all of these episodes solo. And I learn a lot from having guests on who have done a lot of things that I believe other people can learn from. And obviously that's you. So today we're going to talk a little bit about the military, entrepreneurship, writing a book. But why don't you tell the people what you've done, kind of your resume, and then what you're doing now and where you're looking to go in the future.
Yeah, so I joined the Marine Corps right out of high school. I live on Cape Cod, Massachusetts, in a town called Yarmouth. Graduated in 2006. Left for boot camp a week later. When I was in the Marines, I was stationed at Camp Lejeune with 2nd Light Airborne Reconnaissance Battalion. Went to Iraq in 2008. Came back, did a quick turnaround, and went to Afghanistan for the big troop surge for Operation Kunjar in 2009. While I was over there, it was, a pretty eventful deployment. First time I saw combat. First time I learned a lot of valuable life lessons that stuck with me forever. Got out of the Marines in 2010. Had no idea what I wanted to do with my life. Got pushed in the direction of being a police officer. Ended up going to the police academy in 2011. Graduated in 2012, and I've been doing that ever since in the town of Yarmouth where I grew up too. So I've been a sergeant there as a supervisor since 2019. So going on 5 years now. So
Nice. Congrats. And obviously, again, thank you for your service. Things were really, really heating up back then. In the book that you just wrote, that you are actively promoting, if you want to tell people where to find it, what's the title of it, and a little bit about what that book is called, we can get into the questions right after that as well.
yeah, so I published my first book December 21st of 2023, and it's about my time in Afghanistan in 2009. It's called Summer 2009: A Journey of Self-Discovery Amidst the Afghanistan War. And when I was on that deployment I mentioned earlier, I kept a journal throughout the deployment, basically just kind of keeping my thoughts on what was going on around me, just detailing everything that I thought was important on the deployment. Well, in the midst of that deployment, my really close friend who I graduated high school with, joined the Marines with, got killed. His name was Nick Exaros. He's from Yarmouth too. He was with 2nd Battalion, 8th Marines, while I was with 2nd LAR. So we weren't in the same area, but we were in the same area of Afghanistan, but we weren't in the same immediate vicinity, if that makes sense. In the middle of the deployment, I ended up getting sent home for his funeral under some pretty remarkable circumstances that involved a couple of United States senators getting together and talking to the Secretary of Defense to send orders down the chain to my battalion commander that ultimately got me on a helicopter heading to Bagram Air Base and then making it home just in time for his wake and funeral. And long story short, I go back to Afghanistan, continue the rest of the deployment, a whole bunch more stuff happens, continued with that journal that I was keeping the whole time. Come home from the deployment. About 6 months later, I get out of the Marine Corps. That's when I started my life. But as time went on, I really wanted to make sense of that whole experience. And as most veterans do, and especially combat veterans, you don't really talk about that stuff in a productive way anyway. Mostly it's just kind of getting drunk with your buddies and talking to people you think will understand it. So as time went on, I got more established in my law enforcement career, got my legs underneath me, and kind of felt like I was finding my rhythm in life. And then 2021, the withdrawal of Afghanistan happens, which kind of brought everything back to the forefront for, I'm sure, everybody who was there, and especially people who lost something over there. So from that, I decided to dust off that journal that I kept in Afghanistan all those years earlier and start reading through it. And as I was reading through it, I realized that there was a story there I wanted to tell. And I wanted to tell it through that journal because I felt like that was the only way to really depict what I dealt with over there and what a lot of other people probably dealt with. And the idea of it is that my story was just one of thousands of experiences waiting to be told by veterans of Iraq and Afghanistan. And I did the book just through my perspective and my eyes, just because I wanted to show that I was nothing more than a 21-year-old kid trying to figure it out at the time. I wasn't, anything special. I wasn't a Navy SEAL. I was just a 21-year-old Marine infantry corporal that was kind of dealing with what was put in front of him and dealing with a lot of situations that were a first time for me and really changed my life.
Yeah, and I think there's so much power in the everyday man sharing his stories, and that's really the ethos behind this podcast too, is because we all listen to podcasts where these incredible people doing 1% things or talking about the 1% of stuff that will never most people will never experience. And I'm not saying that what you did was average. Obviously, what you did was completely heroic, as everybody else during that period of time. But you're right about people in the military are kind of told not to talk about it or to take out your big straw and suck it up. And then we rely on our buddies to make these really dark, sick, twisted jokes to kind of make us feel better for a short period of time. And I think there's an element of catharsis in writing that most people will not ever experience. Most people don't write a book. And even if you keep a journal, or even if you journal your thoughts, writing a book, you were probably able to process the most you've ever been able to. And the sharing of that story is very powerful. I mean, what was your experience? Did you feel a weight being lifted off you? What was the main thing you learned from writing that book?
Yeah, for sure about a weight being lifted off of me. Yeah, it was very cathartic, very therapeutic. And it was one of those situations where the more I wrote, the more I remembered, and the more I remembered, the more I remembered. And I connected with a lot of people throughout writing the book too that I hadn't talked to in many years. I mean, last week I just went and got lunch and beers with my battalion commander. I talked to him for 4 hours, shooting the shit. I mean, you're talking about a guy that those two people wouldn't be having a conversation. You know what I mean? So it was very cathartic, but I would say a weight was lifted off me, but it was almost replaced by another weight, but one that I want to be carrying, which is to do something with this now, to make it matter, to not just be, oh, I wrote this book, great, it's out there. I wanted to inspire and encourage and show other people that they could do the same thing. And that doesn't even have to be through writing a book. I mean, writing's not everybody's thing. It could be through a podcast. It could be through even just talking to their friends about something they've been holding in for a long time and changing the context of which these potentially traumatic events hold in their life. So it's not this, it's necessarily negative thing that's coming to define you, but it's just one part of your life, and you can use your experiences to help other people.
I completely agree. And when you throw all of the chips on the table, like all the good ones, the bad ones, the ugly ones, and you stop trying to hold your hand against that proverbial door to your past, right? You're able to look at the good, the bad, the ugly, and say, okay, what can I learn from this? How can I use this to better my life? How can I use this information to share and better other people's lives? And I think that's exactly what you're doing here. There's an element of authenticity that is completely unmatched to what it is that you're doing. And I commend you greatly for that. So
I appreciate
thank
that a lot.
thank you again. Let's hop into the questions if you're ready.
Yeah.
And I know we just talked about those, but you know the format of the podcast. So very elemental. Like you can just keep it wave tops or you can go as deep as you want. I'll let you know when you're getting close to 5 minutes, but wrap it up. Like if someone was listening to this, an entrepreneur, somebody who's young in the military or somebody who's thinking about that, how can you frame your knowledge or experience so that they can take away these really good kernels? Because like I said earlier, we listen to these hours long podcasts just to be able to take away one bit of information. I don't want to condense that time
Seems
frame
like
down for
seems like the standard for that's getting longer and longer too. It's four and a
it.
half hour ones now. It's crazy.
Yeah, it's crazy. Like who has time for that? Even if you listen on 2x, like
Yeah.
I love some of the people that do podcasts. There's amazing people out there. Those conversations would never take place and never be recorded at any other time period in history. So it's fantastic that we have that. But that's why like YouTube Shorts or Instagram or TikTok is great because you can watch a 60-second clip from a 4.5 hour podcast and be like there's the main idea.
Yep.
So question number one, I'll set my stopwatch here. And question number one for you is what was the biggest thing you learned from being in the military?
I would say my immediate response to that is how to deal with a bad situation and just move forward. You're in these situations that are just can be miserable, absolutely miserable, and there's not a single thing you can do about it. So you kind of develop this mentality of like, all right, well, I'm in this, I'm either going to laugh at it or just, you know, find a way through it. And once you have that mentality, you can translate that to a lot of things in life. I mean, I learned many other lessons too, mostly about what good and bad leadership is. I mean, a lot of people they can identify what they think is good leadership because they, listen to Jocko Willink's podcast or read his books or just him for one example. But when you see bad leadership in real time, it sticks with you for the rest of your life. And especially people that really can't figure it out. And it really stuck with me of, I don't ever want to be like that guy. And that was something that really, really stuck with me as time went on. And also just figuring things out as you go, getting put in a situation and just adapting. I really live most of my professional life now under the context of being professional, reliable, and adaptable. And I think if you can do those three things, you can get through anything.
Dude, spot on. I talked to a lot of vets, and everyone pretty much says those main things, but you hit the nail on the head perfectly. And I know you have that written down somewhere. Again, I haven't ordered your book, and I've told you that I would. So I'm sure it's written down in there, but I completely agree with you. People in the military have got to learn how to deal with bad situations, and you can't be indecisive in the military. Like you make a decision and either you win or you learn. Like, yeah, maybe you lose, right? And ultimately that price you could pay is your life, but you have to make a decision. And especially in training environment and any other parts of the military other than combat, like you have to make a decision and there's no room for being indecisive. And I agree, like translating it back to the civilian world, once you see what bad leadership is in the military, and unfortunately that does exist, huge supporter of our military, obviously, but I have seen some bad leaders there. And you're right. You innately know it. Other people know it. And you go, I never want to act like that guy. And then you never do. And that is such a takeaway. It's not a negative. It's not a dig against the military. Obviously, you're never going to be able to eliminate that. But what do you think makes a good leader and what do you think makes a bad leader? If you quickly want to comment on that.
I think one of the strongest attributes a good leader needs to have is empathy, is to put himself in the shoes of the people he's leading and understand that everyone's standard may not be quite what yours is, but they're still trying their best. So you have to take it for what it is. If you hold everyone else to your standard all the time, you may be continuously disappointed and start thinking people are incompetent. Whereas if you look at people for, what their best strengths are, you see that, okay, that person's legitimately trying their best. I got to understand what I'm dealing with and work with that person, not just, condescend people when they don't rise to what you expect them to.
Yeah, and empathy is so good. And the amount of times that you hear, perception is reality. If perception is reality all the time in the military, then those people's perspective sucks. And I think you would agree with that. But I hate when I've heard that in the military. And I always agree that empathy leads to a better perspective, right? It's not just about your perception all the time. And I think people in the military just get used to seeing that as like, oh, their perception is their perception, and everything has to be seen through that lens. And I think for me, that's what defines a good leader is they have better perspective on almost all sides. If that includes other people's shoes or other sides of the situation, I think that to me is like a key definition of a leader saying, okay, I want to understand what you're thinking here. I want to understand your thought process. That to me is someone who's trying to lift me up instead of just being like, nope, you're wrong because I see it this way and that sucks and you're awful, right?
And consistency too. There's nothing worse than the leader where you don't know who you're getting on what day. If the guy hasn't had his coffee or not, he's acting like a totally different person. So if you're the same guy all the time, people know what to expect from you. So they know if there's consequences for something, they think, okay, well, I had that coming. It's
Mhm.
not, you're not making decisions based off of knee jerk emotions and, you know, hair trigger reactions. That there's nothing worse than that.
Yeah, emotional mastery goes a long way, and that's something we work on our entire lives. But I completely agree with you. Those are excellent takeaways. Question number two for you is what was the most eye-opening thing you learned from combat?
I would say the randomness of it. We've all been conditioned, and I haven't seen a ton of combat. I mean, I was in a couple of firefights in Afghanistan. I'm not trying to sit here and talk like I landed on Omaha Beach or anything like that. But what I did learn from my experiences is just it's the randomness of it. We've all watched war movies, we've played Call of Duty, and it looks like it's this almost game of paintball in a way, except that people don't get back up. And it's one of the things I really tried to portray in my book was how these things happen that have no rhyme or reason. A single mortar round is shot one day and happens to send off a piece of shrapnel that kills one guy, and then there's nothing else after that. It's not even in the midst of some big battle. It's just, two guys on a scooter, two Taliban guys on a scooter in the middle of the desert quickly set up a mortar shot it and that just happened to land and kill a guy, and then they drove away and there's no one to even return fire at. Or they, people plant an IED on a dirt road days earlier, and some Marines or soldiers or whatever just happen to be driving down that road on that day at that time, blows up and kills or injures some, if not all of them. And that was the biggest eye-opening thing for me in Afghanistan, was just the total randomness of it all, and the lack of immediate retribution. You want to get revenge, so to speak, and a lot of times there's no one to get revenge against, and you just deal with it, and you accept that that's part of what your mission is, and you move on. And but it was very eye-opening to me what combat actually was compared to what I thought it would be. And there were some similarities to what I thought it would be. I mean, when you're actually shooting guns and doing all that, you're like, well, wow, this is something, because you've shot guns before. But when people actually start getting hurt and dying, then it's like, oh, this isn't a game.
Yeah, again, I'm not asking you to share like specific experiences, but I've always heard that the randomness and the surrealness, right, of hearing a bullet actually go past you. Like, there's really no other, you can't really simulate a training environment where bullets, you hear the sound of that crack like over you. Did you feel like time slowed down a little bit? Was it like you were in a flow state? I mean, what was that experience? What you said, the more you remembered, the more you remembered when writing your book. But when going back to those moments, did it feel like you were existing in another world? Was it surreal? Like,
Yeah, absolutely. There's one significant firefight we got in on July 6th, 2009, and my platoon got caught in a ambush, and they had this road pre-designated with their own IDF. So they landed probably like 5 mortar rounds in a row. My vehicle got caught right in the middle of it. So I'm the vehicle commander sticking out of the top of the vehicle, and a mortar round lands probably not even 30 feet next to me, to the point where it, rocks the vehicle to the side. I could hear the shrapnel hitting off of it. In that moment, that was when I said, okay, this is real. And it did. Yeah. I went into some sort of tunnel vision, I guess you could say. And a lot of instincts kick in, and you just start making decisions, and you never really know how you're going to respond to that till you're in it, I suppose. And that tunnel vision is definitely a very real thing, though. I can definitely vouch for that.
what would you say about your training? Did you feel like your training kicked in some of those spots?
Yeah, 100%. As soon as we took contact in that manner, where it was a legitimate fight, I immediately took my 240 golf and just started firing rounds without even thinking about it, and just ripped through a whole 200 round box of 7.62, and then replaced it with another one, and just kept shooting, and at the same time talking on the radio and coordinating things. So the training definitely kicked in, and it was something that showed very quickly for everybody, my whole crew too. I mean, you got the guy driving I was in an LAV AT. The driver, he can't see what's going on at all, and he's moving around, going where I'm telling him to, hearing rounds ping off the vehicle. So it's everybody did what they were supposed to do, and it was really impressive, and it was a life altering moment for me.
Of course, and shooting a 240 is pretty awesome in and
Yeah,
of itself, right?
yeah,
But um, so I love that, and I know I don't want to spoil too much from the book because I know you do go in depth with a lot of that. But I want to ask you, from writing the book, leaving the Marines, becoming a cop, what do you feel like is your mission and your purpose now?
now in my life, I feel like everything I do is to make some sort of difference on some level. I don't really, I mean, I've just come to realize that we have such a short amount of time to live life, and especially in your youth too. So I really try to be very tactful and very mindful of how I'm allocating my time and what I'm doing and the direction that I'm giving my energy to. And I think making a difference, as far as, like writing this book, has probably been the proudest thing I've ever done in my whole life, because it's really the only thing I've ever done that I created from absolutely nothing. And that's my own vulnerable experiences. So really, I just wanted to make a difference to other veterans or anyone who's had to deal with a traumatic experience, that they could read that and be inspired to make some positive outcome from their experience and turn it into something productive. So I'd say for me right now, that's the biggest thing in my life, is just trying to make a difference in everything I do. And that's, easier said than done a lot of the times. And it sounds kind of corny, I suppose, but I think if you're not trying to make a difference, then what is it you're doing? Just existing? I mean, that's not what I want to do.
I went and saw Jordan B. Peterson last night speak in Durham, and it was fantastic. So I'll save you the whole 70-minute lecture, but he essentially boiled it down to you have no other choice but to become the best version of yourself to help everyone around you. And you better do it in a damn well positive and virtuous way, or else, right? Like that was it. That was it. It was like literally every single day you need to show up and be 110% and do everything that you possibly can in this life. Because the one contract that you have coming into this life, this incarnation, the one thing that the price that you pay is death. So you better make every damn day count, right? And I have memento mori tattooed right here on my collarbone because that means remember you will die. And it's
Yeah.
not like
I
a
got it. I
morbid.
got it. I got it on my leg.
Yeah, it's like the best thing ever because it's not about being a grin like, oh, you're gonna die someday, but it's about, dude, you better show up and be the best goddamn version of yourself. There's no real time to like sit around and feel sorry for yourself. And that helps me, produce, and I try and help a lot of people in the ways that I can. But for you, being a veteran, being a cop, these are two things that used to be extremely, extremely applauded as careers. Okay. This is kind of a bonus question. I don't know how you feel about this in today's society, but being a veteran is not really looked at as the same way that it once was. And obviously being a cop is not really looked at as being, as virtuous of a career as it once was. And I would argue that you've made a huge difference on both of those fronts, but not everybody sees it that way. So do you see yourself as providing service in that regard? And then if so, how do you wish to continue that in the civilian sector as a private individual or a public individual?
Yeah, I think the question about veterans not being as plot as they once were is really just because there's been so much distance between us being in actual conflict and wars. So it's people are just starting to forget. As far as the law enforcement, I mean, that ebbs and flows with whatever happens in the media. It's been in a serious lull for probably, 4 years, 5 years now, but it'll swing back as soon as something else happens. So that's something that can never be taken personally. But it has always confused me how much the country applauds veterans, but doesn't have the same sentiment for police. And it's like, I think it was last week, could have been 2 weeks ago, but there was 12 police officers killed within, I think, a 3-day period. And it's it's just amazing to me that people don't understand, regardless of what you think about that job, regardless of what experiences you've had with the police, regardless of whatever, there's people out there that are wearing a uniform and putting their life on the line to protect society. And they're human beings. They're not going to all be perfect. They're going to make mistakes. They're going to do this stuff, but someone has to do that job. And the fact that it's not as applauded as it has been for veterans, which, it's kind of universally something that America gets behind for the most part, has always been very strange to me. And I think that it's just the entire country is really subjected to the media, and their opinion sways depending on what they're told. And all you need is one thing to happen where people get back on the side of the police.
Yeah, I know the shooting in Charlotte, North Carolina just happened last week, and I hate how there's been almost no news about it, right? And I live in North Carolina, and I have friends that live in Charlotte, and I've asked them. I said, "Hey, what happened? Who was it? What was the deal?" And I've heard almost nothing. Apparently, there was two people that essentially planned an ambush against cops. And it's like we lose more police officers over the past couple of years than we have soldiers, right? And all the training incidents. And it's kind of crazy. It's mind blowing. These are still people that are putting on a uniform that are protecting our cities, right? I was on a phone call earlier today with my buddy who he's in the FBI and he works down in Miami and he's on their quick response team. And he's telling me he's doing like 2 or 3 hits a week, getting in gunfights at least once a week minimum, and he's also a Green Beret. So it's like he's doing more stateside right now than he would do on a 6-month deployment to like Somalia or somewhere else. And it's mind blowing to me how much violence and how much uh you guys put on the line every single day. I think it should be really commended.
Well, and you go back to the randomness I was talking about earlier with combat. You get the same thing in law enforcement. I mean, it doesn't matter how small of a police department you work for or how big of one. No matter where you are, you're dealing with society's problems just on a scalable level. You work for LAPD, you're obviously dealing with a lot more people and a lot more problems than if you work for a department with 20 guys. But that doesn't mean that department that has 20 officers in it doesn't have bad things happen and they're not in the same amount of danger relative to what they're surrounded by. And you've seen this trend where a lot of these shootings too that happen are in very small, random, obscure towns. You know, you could say the same thing about the school shootings. A lot of these happen in places that you would never think like, oh yeah, that's somewhere that would happen. So it's not exclusive to just certain parts of the country. And it's just amazing to me how little coverage, like you said, there is about a lot of these things.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to get, I don't want to go there specifically today. This podcast is, you can say whatever you want essentially. But for me, I want to kind of censor myself because I could say something that could get me in trouble. But I wish there was more media coverage supporting and condemning, right, the violence against the people actually trying to protect us. It seems like it's very much the other way right now politically, and it's concerning, right? Mostly because it's an election year, and historically election years tend to bring more of that type of violence, or there's more media coverage, and it can be more inflaming. So how my ultimate question for you, and this will be kind of the last one, is how do you bring yourself away from that high level stress, right? That adrenaline, that cortisol. How do you balance yourself on the opposite side? How do you take care of Andrew behind the scenes, not only as a veteran, but also as a police officer?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, not every day is high level stress at my job. There's sometimes it is, sometimes it isn't. But regardless, it's still there on some level. And for me, it's a lot of it has become writing, trying to forward this book, trying to continuously make a difference. The gym, exercising, spending time with friends, traveling has become a huge part of my life. You know, I'm a firm believer in not getting attached to any one identity. Like being a veteran is just part of my life, being a police officer is part of my life, but that doesn't, neither one defines me, you know. So I've made it a point to travel as much as possible in the last 3 years and try to see as much of the world as I can to just continuously gain perspective, because I feel like perspective and point of view is something you have to earn, and you earn it by going and meeting new people and doing new things and seeing as much as possible. That's how you have the ability to pass on new information to people. You know, if you're somebody who just listens to a lot of podcasts, reads a lot of books, that's great, but you got to be out there doing the thing too. And releasing this book out into the world, for me, on the civilian side and the overall bigger picture of my identity and myself and whatever, it's elevated myself to a level of accountability that's been kind of overwhelming at times, because it's like, all right, now I put this out there, people expect certain things of me. I can't just write about this in a book and then not be that guy all the time, which is it's a good thing in my opinion. But it's been strange in some ways, because I feel like I'm kind of walking around naked sometimes. Like people know all these deep inner things about me. I mean, I released my damn journal out into the world. So it's like, but yeah, I mean, I kind of went off on a bit of a tangent there, but I do it by a lot of different things, and a lot of it's exercise, travel, writing, and just trying to keep moving forward.
I think those are very human things to do. And I think that regular humans don't do enough of those normal human things, which is just travel, grow, seek, experience. When you attach yourself to an identity in the past, I think that means you are constantly lugging around this anchor. And I see this with a lot of veterans, unfortunately, or these famous Navy SEALs that continue to use retired Navy SEAL as their primary identifier, even if they're 5, 10, 15, 20 years out. And it's like, hey, that's cool, man. But like, who are you now? Like, what are you doing now? Like, are you a CEO doing this, doing that, whatever? And I think your purpose as a human being is to continue to evolve, to travel, to learn, to share, to grow, to like learn from others, to also to teach others. Like it's an ongoing cycle in like four different directions. Like you're never done. I think that you got to keep flowing, which is exactly what you're doing. And again, I commend you. I thank you for your service. Thank you for writing this book. And if there's anything else you want to say or let people know, whether it's an entrepreneur or someone just listening to this podcast, the floor is yours.
Well, first, the audiobook is now available too, since I know a lot of people do that. It's you can get it on my official website, just andrewcoville.com. There's a link to the physical book and the audiobook there. And on the website is pictures to go along with it, as you'd see them in the book, but they, have descriptions and all that stuff. So definitely, if you're interested and you don't like reading books, check that out. I narrated it myself too. So you can listen to me talk for about 4.5 hours.
Nice, with that beautiful Massachusetts accent. I love
Yeah.
it. We're really
But
bringing it home.
beyond that, I would say if you want to do something, just do it. I know that sounds cliche, but that's with this book. I had read a ton of books. I loved reading books, and I was like, well, why can't I write a book? And then I did it, and now here we are. And I think you could translate that thought process to really anything. You can take at least some step in the direction towards what you want to do.
I think everybody when they first begin is an imposter. But I think if you're an imposter with a virtuous goal in mind, I think you very quickly do not become an imposter.
Oh, and that's for sure. And that's something I've battled with a lot, especially going and doing talks about this book and all these things. I start to think, am I that guy who's talking about the 15 years ago, I did 4 years in the military. Like I battle
Mm.
with that a lot. And it's like, well, no, I'm trying to do a totally different thing here. But I also read this really interesting thing the other day about imposter syndrome. And it was basically saying that the people who don't have imposter syndrome are the ones you got to worry about because they're arrogant. They think they know everything
Yeah.
and they think they belong there. Like you have to
Hmm.
have that sense of like, damn, am I really supposed to be here to keep you moving and to stay humble and all those things? So if someone doesn't have imposter syndrome on some level, or at least the vulnerability to admit that they have it, some people will
Yep.
just, they'll lie and say that they don't, but I think everyone does on some level. And those of us who can admit it and are open to getting guidance and advice from people those are the ones who progress the furthest in life.
100%. There's a healthy dose of imposter syndrome that you should always have. But I remember I was a skydive instructor for a long time. It didn't matter how many thousands of jumps I had done, what time of the day. I was always nervous, always. And the guys that I would teaching AFF, taking guys on the first, second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh jump, whatever. If they weren't nervous, those guys scared me even more. Right. And I'm like, dude, I've done this a couple thousand times. You're doing this for like the seventh time and you're saying you're not nervous. It's like, this is going to be a fucking wild ride. And I think that there's an element that keeps you in check, not only with imposter syndrome, but just being slightly nervous. And I think when you feel both of those things, it's okay. It's very human, but you should feel the fear and you should do it anyway, especially if you have a virtuous goal in mind. Right? If that is, you want to learn this to help others, you want to do this, become a better man, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I think it goes down the board. So you've said some incredible things, man. And I'll splice out some clips. I'll get this up tonight. And yeah, man, I just really appreciate you coming on. And we'll definitely have to have more talks about politics and election stuff after this for sure.
Yeah, that could be a touchy one.
Yeah, we'll see. We'll see if we post it, but we should at least have that conversation. But yeah, man, thanks for hopping on. And please, if you want to reach out to Andrew, you want to let people know how to contact you if they want to get in touch.
Yeah, the best way would be my official website, andrewcoville.com, has got my social media links on there, my email. Any way you can get in touch with me is on there.
Sweet, man. Well, that's a wrap for episode number 77. We'll get you on again soon. And thanks for coming on, Andrew. Much appreciated.
Thank you, Kim. I'll talk to you soon.
All right. Yeah.